I never saw it coming. 18 years of marriage, and she threw it all away for my own brother-in-law. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, but I wasn't going to let them win. I made a decision that day. I would take everything from them, just like they took everything from me. I watched them from the shadows, planning my revenge. Every move they made, every secret they shared, I knew. And when the time was right, I struck. They thought they could ruin my life, but they have no idea what real devastation feels like. Now it's my turn. In any emergency, there are important steps to take. If someone collapses with a heart issue, you press on their chest to help get oxygen to the brain until help arrives with a defibrillator to restart the heart. You should stop any bleeding before you think about treating a broken bone. I was sitting on my patio trying to think about what to do first now. I had no clear idea. This was new for me. I felt completely caught off guard. As a trained critical care nurse, I learned to be very observant. I could notice small signs that a patient was struggling before things got serious. When that happened, I knew what to do. This skill had helped me save lives, but I missed the signs that my marriage of nearly 18 years was in serious trouble. The only choice I had made was that I didn't want to try to fix it. In fact, I felt quite the opposite. I really planned to end everything. I wanted it to hurt, especially for my soon-to-be ex-wife. But then I paused. I realized there were innocent people caught up in this, and I didn't want them to suffer when I went after her and the man she was seeing. I took another drink of my beer and stared out at my backyard, thinking about what I might do next. Aside from a few oak trees and 3 pecan trees, I had a nice, smooth lawn that stretched from my patio to the bayou. We already had enough trouble with snakes in Louisiana, so I didn't want to give them more places to hide near my house. The only plants I allowed were the azaleas out front. The house behind me was big, with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. It had a classic Southern-style porch that ran across the entire front. But besides that, it was anything but traditional. The inside of the house had all the best features when it was built. The pipes and electrical work were very good. They did not skimp on building it. The kitchen was up to date, even though it hadn't been changed much. They had replaced the old appliances over time. Now the roof was covered in solar panels. I never could have paid for that house or the 8 beautiful acres around it with my job as a nurse. It was a present from my dad and grandpa when I told everyone I was getting engaged to Bonnie. This land had been part of my family for a long time. My grandpa and dad helped build the house, or the company they owned did. Fontenot and Sons Construction was famous in our town and is now led by one of my cousins. My dad and his brother were almost retired now. My grandpa had passed away 2 years ago. He felt a bit let down that I wouldn't join the family business, but he respected my choice to go back to nursing school. I had already earned a degree in business and tried working in an office for a few years. But after spending summers in high school and college in the heat, I didn't want a job in construction. Making a lot of money was never my main goal. I just wanted enough to support my family. Sure, here's a rewritten version of your text. I could buy nice things because I had a good job. I owned a lovely boat for our camping and fishing trips. I also had a sturdy truck to pull the boat when we needed to travel on land. I got all the fishing equipment I wanted. Like many Cajuns, I had rifles and shotguns for hunting. I took my family on vacations whenever I could get time away from my job as the assistant head nurse in the critical care unit at our local hospital. I always made sure my kids had what they needed for their activities. Besides my work with patients, my family was the most important part of my life. Now, I was worried about their happiness. I glanced over the 200 yards that stood between my house and the one next door. A woman stepped out of her back door. Her house looked just like mine, with the same size yard and similar furniture and colors. My grandfather built my sister's house right after finishing mine. We had a shared dock and boathouse by the bayou. I raised my hand to get her attention, and she came over. It was time for us to have an important chat. "Starting a bit early today, Rob? It's only 2 o'clock, she said, pointing at the drink in my hand. "A whole cooler?" she added, noticing the cooler next to my chair. "I'm off work for the rest of the week, and I just feel like relaxing," I replied softly. She understood that I worked 4 long shifts of 12 hours each, and then took at least 3 days off every week. Sometimes I would take my days off together so I could go on a short trip without using my vacation days. I liked working extra hours because it helped me afford some nice things. I don't want to waste time going back home for another drink. I opened my cooler and handed her one. She opened it and sat down. So what's so important that we needed to talk right now? I was really scared when you told me to leave work and come home. I felt even worse when you said I shouldn't talk to anyone before I spoke to you, Susan said. If you hadn't told me that no one was hurt or in trouble, I would have lost it. It's clear you're not worried about anything. I can tell you didn't call me home just to have someone to hang out with. Getting to the point, I said, I learned a few hours ago that Bonnie has been unfaithful to me. I received an email. I tried to sound calm, like I was talking about the weather. But my voice shook a little. Are you certain? It seems like a mean prank, but are you sure someone isn't just playing with you? She asked, surprised. I nodded and explained that the email had a video attached, so there was no mistake. Who sent the email? I don't know, I replied. It just said, you need to know your wife is being unfaithful. Here is the proof. I'll send more later. The person's name was Pissed Off 999. I didn't know who they were. Susan paused for a moment, thinking about what I had said, and then started to express her anger. That cheating woman, she fumed. How could she do that? Doesn't she realize you would be really upset with her and the person she was with? I'll make sure she knows not to mess with us. So you know who the guy is from the video? I nodded and was about to respond, but she interrupted me. If Rich ever betrayed me, I'd make sure he saw how I took control. I'd find a way to make him realize what he did was wrong. Speaking of this, how does Bonnie find time to be with someone else? She's at home almost every night. Well, except when we go out with our friends for girls' night and I'm always by her side. She never seems interested in other guys. I mean, we all joke about handsome men and mention if one has a nice look or a good build. She often drove to work with Rich. If something was going on, he would notice right away. Susan stopped talking when she saw my shocked face. My sister always understood things quickly. No way! She shouted. She is with my husband? They are being unfaithful to us? With each other? Her face turned from red to bright red. I could see tears starting to come. I'm really sorry. I wanted to tell you in a kinder way, I said, leaning in to hug her. I took some time to think and calm down. I was able to settle myself enough to not go crazy. She cried a little, but then became strong. Her fierce nature was showing. She never doubted what I had just said was right. Okay, what should we do? Should we wait for them to come back and then confront them? Susan asked. I care about him, but I won't accept this behavior. No, we need to be clever, I replied. Let's not show that we know what's going on. Tonight we act like we did last night. We greet our partners with a kiss. Susan frowned. I'm serious. You need to act normal. We need to make a plan. We'll get some legal help tomorrow. The good part is we know we aren't at risk for any infections unless you are up to something too, I said with a smile to lighten the mood. Susan gave me a playful gesture. No way. I haven't even considered it. Well, not really. You know me. I might joke about dating some famous person or something. But there is no way I would ever do anything. She finished her beer and threw the can towards the trash can with the others. I gave her a full one when she held out her hand. And just so you know, I am not going to be with Rich either. I just got my period 5 minutes ago. She laughed. It will last until we deal with those cheating guys. He is not going to get anything from me. Well, not from me anyway. Bonnie can help him if she wants. She doesn't have to put up with his lying. And we can't let the kids know, I said. Not right now. Susan asked where they were. I tried to send them to visit Grandma and Grandpa this morning, but they didn't leave until a little while ago. They finally went when I came outside. Dad has some projects he wants the boys to help him with, and the girls can figure it out later. They left slowly, not arguing or asking anything. They simply got into Jason's car and drove away. The kids we talked about were my 2 children and her 3. They spent all summer together because we couldn't do regular activities because of the COVID pandemic. They only went their own ways when school started, and even then, they made sure to help each other. The oldest was my son Jason, who was 17. Rob, named after me, was Susan's oldest child and was a few months younger than Jason. Her twins, a boy named Dave and a girl named Cindy, were a year younger at 16. My daughter, Deidre, was also 16. Having 5 kids between us in just 2 years was both a lot of work and very rewarding. Managing 5 babies and then toddlers was quite overwhelming at first. Luckily, we stopped having more kids after that. As the children grew, they started to feel more like brothers and sisters rather than just cousins. Rich had always been a caring father and uncle. He cared about the kids' education and helped them with their schoolwork. While I helped them learn, I often ended up doing most of the fun outdoor activities. I wasn't really into sports, so I wanted to show the kids the way I grew up. I shared with them the things I learned as a kid. We went camping, fishing, and even hunting together. When they were little, we camped in the backyard, just a bit away from the house, but not all the way to the bayou. The girls wanted a turn too, so I made sure they could join in and have equal time. I would take the boys 1 week and then take the girls a week later. It was a wonderful way for us to come together. As the kids grew up, we explored deeper into the swamp on our trips. Fishing trips became busy, so I asked Rich or Susan to take the other boat. This way, Rich could enjoy being out in the wild, as he liked to call it. For the past year, he let his sons take the boat out while he stayed at home. As the boys grew older, we didn't take much food with us on our trips. We usually only brought some sauces, spices, a bag of dried beans, and some rice. The kids learned to find their own food if they got hungry. If we caught fish, we all shared it, but if we didn't catch much, we might go hungry that night. I hope the kids enjoyed this challenge as much as I did. My kids, that's how I thought of them all, were really strong. They could take care of themselves, but also knew how important family and teamwork were. They learned how to work well together. Just 3 weeks ago, I changed my work schedule to have 6 days off. I took one boat with the girls as my passengers, while the boys got into another boat. We moved slowly to stay clear of obstacles in the shallow water. I stopped my boat a few times so the girls could take turns driving. The boys switched places at the same time. We spent a whole week at Pawpaw's old fishing camp. We did some fishing and even went down the river to catch crabs in the muddy water. We gathered our bait by using cast nets or looking under old logs for crickets and frogs. I thought we were all close as a family. But it seemed like Bonnie and Rich didn't care much about being together as a family. It made me sad to think about telling the kids what Bonnie and Rich were doing. Family meant everything to me. Breaking that bond from inside would be unacceptable, I told Susan. We can't keep this from them, she said, but we can delay it for a little while. I'll be careful not to show that anything is off, she promised. So what do we do next? I can't forgive or forget being betrayed. I just can't. No matter what Bonnie says or why she did it, I replied. Susan nodded. I can handle a lot, but not cheating. I'm going to get rid of her. I just need to find a way to handle this without losing everything. As much as I want to get back at her, I can't risk going to jail. I also can't let her take the kids away from me, and I can't hurt Rich either, no matter how tempting it is. I have to be there for the kids. I finished my beer and grabbed another from the cooler. All right, putting aside my strong wish to see Rich upset, I understand what you're saying, Susan said. The next best thing is to hit him where it hurts, his money. I plan to get every dollar I can from him. I'll make him pay for support for the kids and anything else I can think of. I nodded and told her that might be possible since Rich earned more than she did. But Bonnie could also end up taking a lot from me because, from what I had heard, the courts often sided with women in divorce cases. Listen, my job mainly involves trusts and wills. As a paralegal, I understand the law well enough to know we have more safety than you realize. Don't forget, Susan said with a big smile, a sly look in her eyes. Our most important things are safe. They can't take our houses. Pawpaw gave them to us before we got married. He made sure to put them in our names only. Bonnie and Rich can't claim them. I'm not sure if Bonnie can convince the judge to let her stay in your house until your kids are grown, but I know she cannot take the house itself. She can't even claim the upgrades you made, like the solar panels. That part is a bit uncertain. As for the boats, cars, and truck, she might get half of those things. But she definitely won't get the house. Now that I think about it, didn't you and Bonnie sign a prenuptial agreement when you got married? Susan asked. Daddy made sure I did. I didn't take it seriously back then, but he said you had one, and he mentioned he made a copy of yours. I had totally forgotten about that agreement before we got married. Bonnie's dad was a plastic surgeon, and he earned a lot of money. He was really upset when I got his only daughter pregnant during my summer break when I was in college. Bonnie had just finished high school. To him, I seemed like a risky choice. He imagined me getting close with anyone who would join me in bed or the back of my car. There was some truth to that, but everything changed when I met Bonnie. After that, I never got involved with another woman again. His lawyer created a contract for their marriage. It said that if either person was found to be unfaithful, they would only get 20% of what they had built together. There would be no support payments for the person found to be unfaithful. In Louisiana, a prenuptial agreement can help avoid community property laws if both people sign it before getting married. My father-in-law strongly wanted us to sign one. He believed that eventually I would do something wrong and take half of the money he wanted to give his daughter. The only thing not included was 401k accounts. My father knew about the deal and made sure Susan and Richard signed the same kind of deal when they got married a few months later. It took a long time for my father-in-law to see that his daughter was safe and that I wouldn't cheat. I managed to win his trust. He could see that the other doctors at the hospital respected me. Once, he even suggested I go to medical school and said he would help pay for it. But I said no. I was happy with my life just as it was. Many doctors I knew seemed to work all the time. They earned a lot, but most spent crazy hours at their jobs. For me, time with family at home was very important. "That video of Rich and Bonnie is really troubling," Susan said out of nowhere. I was thinking, no kidding. I mean, who filmed it? How did it get out? Did they record it for fun and then it ended up online? There are so many questions. From what I saw, there were at least 3 cameras. One person at the head of the bed, one at the foot, and one on the side, I said. The video I watched was not changed. It showed the same scene from each angle, one after the other. This makes me think that the person who filmed it was not trying to make an adult video, or they just hadn't put the raw video together yet. I watched it several times. One thing that stood out to me was that neither Rich nor Bonnie looked at the camera or acted like they knew it was there. They didn't make any mistakes. "I think they didn't know they were being recorded," I said. Susan wanted me to get my tablet to show her the whole video. "Wow," she said, surprised. She even let him do that. Rich used to ask me for the same thing, but I always said no. "Is that something you do with Bonnie?" I shook my head. I had cuddled up behind Julie in bed a few times and almost ended up in the wrong spot by mistake. She stopped me every time and asked me to move back as she adjusted herself. She had always made it clear that she didn't want to go there. Now I watched as she happily got close with Rich in a way she had never let me. Rich and Bonnie sometimes joked in their video about how Susan and I were unaware of their feelings for each other, which made Susan upset. "Are you going to ask Rob to help you tonight?" Rich asked. "You know I want you to. Just thinking about it gets me excited." He added, "I'd ask Susan for help, but she knows what it's like." "Does he kiss you after you're together?" I asked with a smile. I couldn't help but tease a little. "Come on," Susan replied right away. Then she looked at me and smiled back. "So, do you kiss Bonnie after you spend time together? I know you kiss her a lot. And I've heard she thinks you do a great job. She has mentioned it to us girls many times over the years." I shook my head and decided to stay quiet so she could enjoy the rest of the video. I really didn't want to talk about what my wife and I did with my sister. "Well, other than what happened in private, I don't see anything special," Susan said, a bit less upset but still really mad about what felt unfair. "They aren't doing anything different from what they have at home, so why are they getting involved with each other? I think they're just trying to pull a fast one on us. You know, doing something they shouldn't for some extra excitement. But it doesn't really matter why. Rich is in big trouble. I still have a problem with who made this video. We need to figure it out. I don't want this coming back to hurt us later. I don't care if everyone sees those people together as long as it doesn't affect us." I agreed and said that we should wait before we respond to everyone. Susan sat quietly for a few minutes. I thought she was just thinking about what we should do next. Then I heard her start to cry. The crying soon turned into loud sobs. I reached out and held her close. I couldn't stop my own tears. We both could no longer hide our pain. That evening I wasn't really drunk, but I acted like I was. I had a half-full beer in one hand when I welcomed Bonnie at the door with a big hug and a kiss. I thought she might pull away to go take a shower, but instead, She held on to me and kissed me back firmly. I took in the scent of her hair and neck, hoping to catch a hint of something pleasant. The air was filled with her light perfume. I had just finished 4 long days of work with 12-hour shifts. I felt a strong attraction. As we kissed, my hand brushed against her, and I felt she was very excited. I quietly checked my fingers. It seemed she hadn't spent time with Rich today. She seemed eager like she often did. I wondered if I should take a chance and get closer. But after what I learned today, my interest quickly faded. I felt a rush of anger and had to hold myself back from lashing out. I had never hurt her before, and I didn't want to start now. I took a drink of my beer and told her dinner was ready. She stared at me in surprise when I suddenly stopped joking and said, "Let's eat." As I turned to leave, I heard her quietly say, "Wow, I thought you might want to eat something." But it wasn't food! Susan and I had already decided to order takeout tonight. Neither of us wanted to cook. We joked about how we could make our meals unappetizing for our partners without affecting the kids. Our laughter didn't help much. It was only a way to keep us from losing our tempers. The next morning, I saw Bonnie getting into Rich's car for their regular trip to work. I called Susan. "How did it go?" I asked. "All fine," she replied. I would have gone crazy a few times if we hadn't laughed about it yesterday and talked about how to handle things. I was worried that he would ask me for a favor when he found out I was pretending to have my period. I honestly thought about saying no or doing something wild instead, but he didn't even ask at all. I think he might be planning to have some fun with Bonnie today. Do you know where they might go? Rich likes to be relaxed when he spends time with someone, like in a cozy bed. I'm really not happy to say this, but Rich doesn't even want to be intimate in the living room or on the floor where he could get hurt. He doesn't even want to go outside on the patio. Unless I am standing and leaning over. I know that might make you think of some wild ideas, but I don't care about that right now. I understood she was just letting off some steam. Susan had always been a bit bold, but right now she was feeling upset and needed to express herself. We had to be open and honest about our feelings, at least for now. If talking in a way that a brother and sister normally wouldn't helped us get through this tough time, I was all for it. At 10 o'clock that morning, Susan and I were in the office of one of her bosses. It wasn't a problem that Susan took care of many of the trusts and wills for the same company. Jake went to school with us. He was a good lawyer for divorces and said he would help us. He was a true friend. "Okay. Are you certain you have a video that shows both of your partners?" Jake asked. We told him we had clear evidence, but chose not to show it to him just yet. He shrugged and said, "As long as you have strong proof of cheating." "All right, I checked your prenuptial agreements. They are really strict. Rob, I can't believe you signed something like this. You didn't ask a lawyer for help, did you?" I told him that I did. Actually, my dad had insisted on getting legal advice. He used the same paper for Susan when she married Rich. Wow. You could have really put yourselves in a tough spot if either of you had been unfaithful. The main point is that the person who cheats only gets 20% of all shared property. This includes savings, bank accounts, stock accounts, and more. The important thing to note is that there is no rule about private income accounts. Do either of you have any money coming in that nobody knows about? Susan and I shook our heads. What kind of account are you talking about? I asked. All right, Jake said. Imagine Bonnie made an account just for herself before you two got married. Maybe the money she received as gifts at your wedding, you know, the cash people pinned on her dress. Legally, she might say that money is hers alone, plus any interest it might earn. Even if she took that money and invested it, the whole account would belong to her, I said, agreeing. That's okay, I replied. But what if she has money that she got after we got married and didn't tell me about it? That would be community property. It's like if you bought a car or a new boat and didn't tell her. The tricky part is the changes you made to your houses. You own the houses completely. They are safe because you received them before you got married. Changing your refrigerators or stoves costs money, just like fixing things or painting the walls. But you both put in solar panels. A judge might say these belong to both of you, since they are a big improvement made with money you both shared. So what? She only gets 20% because she was unfaithful, right? I asked. I'm okay with her getting that. Sure, she can say that about all the furniture we bought. And that's something we can talk about to help us. You can ask her to take her share of the property and get it moved out. She will have to pay to move and store it. Jake smiled. That could really be a hassle for her. She might just agree to let you keep it. These are the little strategies we'll use as we go along. The important thing is that you both have strong agreements in place, as long as you can show that someone was unfaithful. But I need to caution you. Keep that video safe and private. Don't let anyone else see it. If it gets on the internet, they can and likely will take legal action against you. This is true if they can prove that you were the one who took it and put it online. If they filmed themselves being intimate and it somehow became public, that would be their issue. It all depends on how the video was got. It's best to be careful. Jake looked at us closely to make sure we understood his message. Susan and I agreed. We had already discussed editing the video and sharing it with our friends and family. The only thing stopping us was our kids being upset. Now we really needed to find out who recorded it. The next thing we needed to do was send divorce papers to our relatives' spouses. We chose noon on Thursday for that. I suggested we wait until Friday afternoon. This way, they would spend the whole weekend thinking about their situation and what Susan and I knew. They wouldn't be able to get legal advice then. But Jake disagreed. He said that if we waited too long, it would only cost more money. He decided he would ask each of them for a list of their private assets. That will keep them busy all weekend, he said, and it might make their legal costs go up too. If their lawyer talks to them over the weekend, he will charge more than usual, he said. At first, Susan and I thought it would be funny to serve them while we watched. We even talked about inviting them to lunch on Thursday so we could see it happen. Jake laughed and said that it might be fun, but it wasn't a smart plan. In the end, we decided to serve them at work where anyone on the team might see. We said our goodbyes to the cheerful Jake and went to the bank. We would spend a few hours moving money around. We opened new checking and savings accounts just for ourselves. We made sure to get statements showing the balances of all our accounts and then moved 80% to our new accounts. Sadly, our partners' cars were already fully paid off. We imagined what it would be like if their cars were taken away and they had to walk to work. Both families had saved a lot, so we had no debts except for some new credit card charges. We paid off those cards and canceled them. We opened new accounts in just our names. It would take a day or two for the new cards to come. Jake told us not to hide anything we did and to keep records of all we did. I looked at my email. I received 3 more files showing Bonnie and Rich together in a private moment. It was the same room as before. I wrote back to my unknown helper in an email. Thank you for your help, but I need to know how you got these videos. I'm also worried about them ending up online. I hope that doesn't happen. Deep down, I secretly hoped those videos would be changed and shared, turning Bonnie and Rich into stars. But after chatting with Jake, I decided to be cautious. We wanted to make sure that Rich and Bonnie could not connect Susan or me to the issue and start a lawsuit. I could bring up my own email account to help protect myself. An hour later, I received a reply. It just had an address, 9203 Victoria Street, Apt 201. I went to check out the apartment building. As I thought, the woman at the front desk wasn't going to give me any information about who lived in that apartment. Not right away, at least. Listen, I think that apartment might be rented by my brother-in-law for something he shouldn't be doing, I started. The person just stared at me, not saying a word. I really need to know if he lives there. Still, the same blank look came back, so I changed my approach. All right, I can see you don't want to tell me if it's his place or not, but listen to this. He has been involved in dealing drugs, and he might be connected to human trafficking. You know, with women involved in bad situations. I was being dramatic, but I didn't know what else to do. What would the other people living here think if all those police and agencies came in and shut down the whole building? What if they looked through each apartment? Do you think that would help your business? Would your tenants really be okay with that? This made her stop and listen. What is it that you really want? She asked, looking serious. I smiled back at her. Who is living in that apartment? And how long have they been there? I said. I had a paper in my pocket and drove away in my car just 5 minutes later. Rich and Bonnie had rented the apartment for the last 2 years for the insurance company where they both worked. Rich's name was on the lease as the one in charge. I didn't know who had discovered it, but now everyone knew about Rich's secret place. I couldn't help but think about how the company would feel if they realized they were helping Rich with his hidden romance. I decided I would try to find out more about it later. Bonnie's response when she found out was fast and fierce. She called me at 12:30. I thought about what happened in the 30 minutes after she was served and before her call. "What do you mean? You want a divorce?" she shouted. I almost gasped as I told her I knew she was with someone else, so I was letting her go. I didn't say anything about having proof of her being unfaithful. Susan and I had practiced what to say. I just hoped my sister stayed calm when she talked to Rich. "What are you talking about, you idiot?" "Cheating?" Bonnie fumed. "I know some people here wonder why Rich and I are so close. I heard that silly rumor, too. It's been going on for a while. He is my brother-in-law. Are you really that clueless to believe some secretary or whoever your source is, that Rich and I are having something inappropriate?" "Yeah, I guess I am," I replied softly. "Well, if you're that ignorant, let me tell you what will happen if you keep bringing this up," Bonnie said. "If you want a divorce, that's fine. You can leave. I will take care of the kids and you will have to pay for their support. A lot of money. I will also take half of everything we own, including your beloved boat and truck. You'll have to sell them to pay me. Plus all your camping and fishing gear, too. I will stay in the house and you will cover the bills. I will ask for every bit of money I can get. Right now, I don't have a boyfriend, but I will have one when this is over. I know Sue helped Rich, too. He could come live with me and you could pay for it. Imagine moving in with your sister and wondering what Rich and I are up to in my house. Maybe I will even let him be close to me. Is that what you want?" "Go for it," I replied. "Get yourself a lawyer." I barely kept my voice steady. I felt sad that my marriage was over and angry that she was acting like she hadn't done anything wrong. I was ready to lose my temper. I also had to think about her quick response. I really hoped Susan hadn't told Rich too much. "Oh, and just so you know, I have the girls packing your things. Susan has the boys getting Rich's stuff together. It will all be outside the house for you to grab this afternoon. We got restraining orders and changed the locks this morning. You both need to find another place to stay until the court makes a decision," Bonnie shouted before I hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, Susan sent me a message. "Backyard. Bring your cooler. Fill it up." "I can't believe Rich," she said as she opened her beer. "He started with, 'Hey there.' You won't believe what some secretary might think just because Bonnie and I are friendly." I mentioned that Bonnie had also complained about an unnamed secretary. I shared how Bonnie had responded. "Well, that guy is almost pretending they never held hands. He said we shouldn't trust anything we hear. I swear if he was here now, I'd kick him so hard he'd be in pain. I told him to come get his things. I also told him to call first because I was going to the door with a gun. Jake is going to come over soon." He said he had 2 helpers ready to watch over things and stop any troubles from getting worse. I didn't want to pay extra for these helpers to just stand there and watch Rich and Bonnie pack their things, but Jake said it was smart to do this in case Rich said something rude and I got upset. I understood what he meant. He was worried that if Rich made a comment, I might get mad and then end up in trouble for hitting him. I was angry, but not so angry that I would lose my cool. I was already feeling a mix of worry and focus, the way I do when handling a patient in crisis. I knew having a deputy there was a good idea. This entire event was very emotional. "I'm so glad you were the one to talk to the kids earlier," Susan said. "I wouldn't have been able to tell them what was happening. I started crying just listening to you." We had called the kids together and I explained what was happening. I honestly didn't believe I could finish my speech without getting really emotional. But somehow I did. I found the steady but worried nurse inside me, telling the family that their loved one didn't have much time left. I advised them to visit and say their goodbyes while they still could. "What shocked me was how the kids reacted," Susan said. "They seemed almost ready for it. When you said, 'Hey everyone, it looks like your mom and dad are not being honest and both Susan and I cannot accept cheating,' none of them seemed surprised. Do you think they already knew?" "I can't believe they would," I replied. "I had no idea until just a couple of days ago, but they all nodded and immediately started putting Bonnie and Rich's things away. They might be surprised or not understand yet how this could change things for them." My phone beeped, letting me know I had a message. I glanced at it. "I have an email. I wonder if it's from Pissed Off 999, I said. "Come on, check it," Susan urged. When I told her I didn't know how to do that on my phone since I only used it for calls and texts, she laughed and took my phone. After a few taps, we played the audio file that had been sent to me. "Can you believe Robert and Susan helped us?" Bonnie's voice came through. "They must have found out somehow. Oh no, what are we going to do now? I can't believe this. Just last night, Robert was so sweet. If he hadn't had too much to drink, I think he would have come on to me right in the living room. I had no idea anything was wrong, and now this." "Calm down," Rich said. "They don't know anything for sure. Someone here has run their mouth and mentioned that we have lunch together and ride to work in the same car. You have heard the same silly rumors I have. No one really knows what's going on. They can't. We don't even touch or hold hands in public, not any more than any brother and sister-in-law would, maybe even less than that. This is just a tough situation. I would love to leave town with you, waving goodbye to Rob and Susan like we planned. But this is too soon. The kids are still in school and we haven't sorted out our finances yet. Right now the plan is to refuse everything they say. If they're not smart enough to back off from this divorce nonsense, we will make it tough for them. I know a lawyer who can help us. He was in my college group. I'll give him a call soon. Just be careful and don't admit to anything. We will act as if they are just hearing silly rumors. No evidence means no case. But remember, don't say anything you wouldn't want to hear in front of a judge. Act like everything you say is being recorded." Susan and I sat in silence for a few moments after hearing that audio clip. "All right, so we don't know much and are just hearing rumors," I said. "Let's keep it that way for now. I know you noticed what Rich said. They've been planning something for quite a while. He has had that apartment for a couple of years. That makes me want to turn the situation around on them and show them we know what they are up to. The money issue he brought up worries me. We need to be careful and make sure we are safe in case they are doing something wrong and we get involved," said Susan. I could tell she was upset just by how her voice sounded. I didn't need to see her tears to know this was hard for her. "We have to stay strong." "I understand," Susan replied softly. "Jake mentioned that my situation is better than yours. The courts usually support women more." I just couldn't bear the thought of Bonnie getting to take care of Jason and Deidre and staying in your house until Deidre turns 18. The agreement we made might help divide our things, but if she gets to live there for free while you pay support, that's really unfair. I was feeling the same way, but I comforted my sister while she cried. I told her that we would be okay in the end, even though I didn't feel very sure about it. There were no winners in this situation. The goal of a divorce was to minimize the losses. The kids went quiet when Susan and I walked into the house. Deidre and Cindy had stuffed as many of Bonnie's clothes as they could into suitcases and bags. Now they were using plastic trash bags. I had asked them to take pictures of the bags and suitcases they used. I didn't want to share that I planned to count the value of the luggage against Bonnie's share of our things. Every little bit counts, I thought. We went next door to check on how the boys were doing. They were almost done. Rich was wearing fewer clothes, and the boys had just shoved the rest of his clothes into bags instead of neatly folding them. I smiled as I watched Rob, Rich's older son, squeeze what I knew was an expensive suit into a duffel bag like it was just some old t-shirt. They were on my side. I thought for a moment if the boys would say something to help me or get me in trouble later if I decided to do something silly with that duffel bag. I chose not to put them in that situation. On our way home, I read in a text from Bonnie. I quickly called Jake. He arrived in just 15 minutes, and 2 sheriff's deputies came with him. Jake smiled and told me to just relax and enjoy when I asked if he had asked the deputies to stand by. Soon, Bonnie and Rich pulled up in his car. Close behind was someone I recognized, Boudreaux Landry. It really showed his way of thinking. Boudreaux was a bully we remembered from grade school. He was not very smart at all. It confused everyone how he managed to finish college and even law school when we all knew him as a kid. But he did it somehow. "Hey there, Robert," he shouted with a big smile. He said my name as Robert in his thick accent. It bothered me to hear it from him. When my dad said the same name, it felt warm and caring. "I understand you have a bit of an issue with your wife and brother-in-law being close. It's really not a huge deal." In that moment, I felt so angry that I could have aimed a gun right at him without a second thought. But I knew better than to start a fight. He was 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed around 300 pounds. Even if a lot of that weight was in his gut, I knew I couldn't take him on, not even on my best day. I could run around and let him chase me until he got really tired and then give him a little nudge when he fell down, but anything more than that was not happening. "Hey, Boudreaux," I called back. "How's your mom and everyone?" "They're doing well, but we have a small problem we're trying to fix," he said. Then, quickly changing the mood, he asked, "You really think my friend Rich is seeing your wife, do you?" His sly smile showed that Rich had shared a little secret with him. He knew they were seeing each other, but planned to defend the story that it was just a rumor. "Well, the truth is, that's exactly what's going on," I said. I noticed Jake getting close enough to listen in. "I just can't accept that, you know? It's not something I can deal with." I stopped speaking with my usual Southern charm and walked away. "You took most of the money from our bank account?" Bonnie said, pointing her finger at me. "Yep." "I have the papers that show how much was there in the beginning," I said. "When we split the property, you will get exactly what you're entitled to." She looked at me with anger. I decided not to tell her that her credit card would no longer function. It was better for her to find that out by herself. Neither Susan nor I went with Rich or Bonnie into the house to see if there was anything they wanted to grab right away. My daughter Deidre and her cousin Cindy walked behind Bonnie and a deputy as they moved through the house. I had told the kids that their job was to watch and make sure neither Rich nor Bonnie did anything strange. I didn't explain what strange meant. I hoped they would know if they saw it. Jason and Rob were with Rich as he looked around his own home. "Where is my jewelry?" Bonnie asked angrily. I knew that this would be a big problem. Over the years, we took many trips together, like cruises to the Caribbean and stays at all-inclusive tropical resorts. Each year, I bought Bonnie a nice piece of jewelry. We were choosy about what we picked. The gems were beautiful and special, like tanzanite, emeralds, rubies, and diamonds. A few years back, I had a simple check done for insurance, and they said her jewelry was worth at least $25,000. So, Bonnie was really upset to find out most of her jewelry was safely stored away in my safe. Boudreaux started to share his thoughts, but paused when I pulled out my phone to snap a photo of the ring on Bonnie's right hand and the necklace around her neck. "I've listed all these items for insurance," I said. "I want to make sure they don't get lost," only to find out Bonnie gave them away to a friend for a small amount. Taking this picture shows she has them now, so that can't happen. They belong to the community, just like my boat and truck that Bonnie said she would take from me earlier today. I knew Bonnie would react strongly. Boudreaux, on the other hand, looked at me with curiosity. I thought maybe it showed he respected me and believed I had some good ideas in my head. I decided to stay quiet. I didn't want to agree with him or disagree. Jake, who had been watching, spoke up. He said that we all wanted the best estimate of the community's assets. He suggested that Bonnie might even want to take off the ring and necklace she had on. This way, we could get everything valued together. After all, he noted, the ring and necklace were real, just like my photo showed. So why not get a fresh estimate? After a short talk with Boudreaux, Bonnie quietly took off the jewelry and gave it to me. "So where do you want me to go, you jerk?" Bonnie asked. I almost said, "Why not your place on Victoria Street?" But I stopped myself. I shrugged instead. I could feel how much my feelings had changed. Just a few days ago, I was madly in love with her. She and our kids meant everything to me. Now I didn't care about her at all. I felt really angry with her, but at the same time I felt distant about her. Bonnie and Rich got into their cars and drove off. A few minutes later, Boudreaux left too. I shared my thoughts, asking if they were taking their things to the apartment. Jake smiled and said, "I hope so. I have someone following them. Showing that apartment now would help our talks." Sadly, they had already thought of that and went to the Holiday Inn close to their office instead. Boudreaux helped them bring their things inside. I needed to buy more thumb drives to save the audio and video files I was receiving. Susan and the girls were making dinner at our house when my phone buzzed with a new email. She came with me to the den to use the computer. "Listen up, everyone," Boudreaux said. "Robert might have someone watching you. You really don't want him to know about your apartment. That's why I wanted you to stay at a motel and get a room with 2 beds. Make sure you kind of mess up both beds like you slept in different ones. An investigator might pay a maid to look. We can say you are sharing a room to save money." "Yeah, Having only a little money left makes me mad, Rich said. It was really embarrassing when my credit card didn't go through at check-in. I'm glad I took out some extra cash before. So, where do we go from here? I'm going to call the credit card company to see if I can set up a new account by phone. All right. You all should write down your valuables. Robert has already thought about the jewelry, and I'm sure he has started a list. Now, let's talk about something in a guesswork way. If you have any money or belongings that your spouses don't know about, you need to keep them safe. Legally, they belong to both of you, but if Robert and Susan don't know about them, they can't take them. I wanted to ask for a list of that jewelry, but Robert said you already had it checked by an expert, so there is proof of it. He was right about you selling it for a little bit of money and then pretending it was never there. If you have a pile of Krugerrands, I suggest you hide them. If you have a secret bank account, keep just a little bit of money in it. Those accounts can be found easily. You only need your social security number to begin a search, particularly if it's a large amount that needs to be reported to the IRS. Money held in offshore accounts is harder to find. Everything you own will be considered when we divide up the assets or when the paperwork is filed. You don't want to get into trouble for hiding anything at that time. You will confirm that what you show is true and correct to the best of your knowledge. If you lie, you could be charged with a serious crime. Do you see what I mean? Boudreaux said as he said his goodbyes. What do we do now? Bonnie asked. They could find our accounts in Baton Rouge. I thought we were safe using the office address. Forget that, Rich shouted. There's no way I'm giving Susan another dime. We need to call the airline and see if we can get a flight to the Cayman Islands tonight. We can open an account there in the morning and then transfer the money online. It's too late to go to the bank for the checks. I will look for flights. You make the room look like we stayed here. Mess up both beds and wet the washcloths. Crumple the towels. Turn on the shower a little. Don't forget to open the soap and pour some of the shampoo out. Do anything else you can think of to make it look like we were here all night. Then we can leave. I'll call the office and let them know we won't be coming in tomorrow. The recording stopped. They have hidden bank accounts? Susan exclaimed. How is that possible? Where did the money come from? I look at the bank statements and know how much we earn. He couldn't have kept much money without me noticing. I can't believe it would be enough to hide it in the Caymans. I felt uneasy, too. Bonnie and I each got $50 a week in cash just to use for small things when we were out. We usually bought things with a credit card, and we checked the statement every month. We wanted to make sure there were no strange charges or that the card wasn't stolen. I told the lady at the apartment that Rich might be involved in bad things like selling drugs and having women do wrong stuff. I was just joking around, but you don't really think he's up to anything like that, do you? Rich? Mr. Goody Two-Shoes? Susan laughed. He wouldn't even know how to start with that. But I never thought he would be unfaithful to me in a secret place. We decided to put that problem aside for the night. There wasn't much we could do about the hidden bank accounts right then, so we joined the kids for dinner. The next morning, I went to Jake's law office. I had already planned to have the jewelry checked for its value. I also kept a list of all my firearms. It took a few minutes to get the total value from a nearby dealer. I asked him what a fair price would be. There was no way I could sell those guns for the low price he suggested. But now I had his written opinion, which was helpful. It only cost me the price of a new Glock that I had wanted to get for some time. Now Bonnie couldn't say no. Susan went into work to finish up a few things before the weekend. We met in Jake's office. I shared the audio recordings from yesterday with him. I really want to know who is sending you these messages, he said. I can't understand how they could hear Bonnie and Rich in the hotel room so fast. It's not like a private detective could work that quickly. As for the bank accounts, we can check the balances, but we will need a judge's approval. I'm not sure we can get that based on this recording. We will also need to find the account, which might mean hiring an investigator. I will ask a man who helps us with bank questions. He might be able to discover something, but you both feel sure that you haven't lost much money. We shook our heads. It doesn't seem worth all this trouble for a little bit of cash. If someone has been putting away small amounts slowly, they must have been doing it for a long time. I've started the process for the divorce. If you want to move forward quickly like you said, Jake mentioned. Susan and I both felt it was time to move forward. Jake was on board too. Here, it takes 6 months to finish a divorce. But that doesn't mean you have to wait that long for a court date. Next week, we will meet with Bonnie and Rich, along with their difficult lawyer, to discuss what we own together. After that, we'll see a judge who will make a decision. In this state, we follow Napoleonic law. Inheritance rules can be complicated, but divorce is simpler, especially if there is clear proof of cheating. I will say for you that counseling will not help. That used to be something judges ordered, and it still happens in some places. Once the judge decides, you just wait 6 months and then it's over. Oh, Boudreaux Landry called me this morning. He insisted you give back some of the money you took from your accounts. He wants the extra 30%. I told him we had agreements that only give the cheating party 20% of the shared money. I sent him a copy of those agreements. He naturally wanted to see proof of the cheating. I told him that it would be shown in court. He wasn't happy, but there was nothing he could do. Honestly, it's a bit amusing to see Boudreaux struggle. He's a real nuisance in the legal field. I might need to find a way to bring that recording of him advising about hiding money overseas into the courtroom. It might not get him in serious trouble, but it would definitely make him feel embarrassed. I really didn't like the thought of being away from home, but I had to go to work on Saturday and Sunday. My head nurse said she couldn't take those shifts. What if I started coughing and needed a COVID test? I asked. Could you take over for me then? You're annoying, Sharon replied. And I say that with a smile. Yes, I can cover your shifts. I might be the one to step in, but only for this weekend. We need someone with experience available, and I have a family event in Lafayette. My in-laws were not pleased that I missed the last gathering, and my husband has been giving me a hard time about not skipping it this year. I get why you feel the way you do. If I found out my husband was being unfaithful, I would be really upset. You have plenty of vacation and sick days saved up. This situation definitely calls for emergency leave. Mental health is important, especially when we're not feeling well. Soon, we will start our time off. I really can't believe Bonnie would treat you this way. Listen, I said, I don't have much planned this weekend. I'll just be at home, relaxing with some drinks and chatting with the kids and my sister. How about I work this weekend and you let me take my break starting Monday? Really? That's amazing. Thank you. You're a lifesaver. I really appreciate this, Sharon replied. I can arrange that. I'll put in for your leave. I'll start with my sick days and then take some vacation. You can take all the time you need. Just keep me updated. To be honest, work felt like a nice break. Weekends could be a bit crazy. There were fewer tasks, but in critical care, we had to be alert. Maybe even more than during the weekdays. We were the watchful ones for the doctors, who mostly stayed home except for their regular visits. I was surprised to find my father-in-law waiting for me at the nurse's station when I came back from my rounds in the middle of the morning. Hi, Dr. Prejean. What brings a plastic surgeon to the ICU today? I said, trying to sound cheerful for the other nurses. Most of them knew he was my father-in-law, and the rest would find out soon. They had no idea about the issues in my marriage. John, as he asked me to call him when we were alone, did not seem pleased. Stop talking nonsense and let's have a chat, he said sharply. After we closed the door to the nurse's office, he continued, What's this about you kicking Bonnie out of your house? I heard about it last night. She called her mom, crying. John, I found out Bonnie is being unfaithful, I replied. I wasn't going to hold back anything from him. It took a long time for him to respect and trust me after I married his daughter. He knew I was honest and straightforward, just like the sun is always shining during the day. The worst part is that she is being unfaithful with my sister's husband. Now I'm facing a big mess with my whole family. She claimed that it was just gossip from work, John said. They carpool to work and sometimes eat lunch together. She said the talk about her having an affair with her boss is just a rumor. I didn't want to share how much I really knew, but it took me years to earn this man's respect. I decided to share my feelings with him. I haven't told anyone this except my lawyer and my sister. I haven't even faced Bonnie and Rich about what I know, let alone talk to the kids, I said, my feelings rising up inside me. I held back my anger and sadness. I have evidence. I mean real video and audio recordings. It's more than just hearsay. I would never have lost my cool over a simple rumor. But this... I shook my head. Dr. John Prejean looked at me, surprised. He could see that I was being honest. What are you going to do? He asked gently. He already had a good idea of what I would say. What can I do? I answered. I'm trying to make things easier for the kids. They shouldn't have to watch their family fall apart. But I can't just sit back and accept this, John. Tell me, what would you do if Bonnie came to you and said she had proof I was unfaithful? To his credit, John was truthful with me. I would want to see you completely defeated. I would help her hide what happened to you. I noticed tears starting to gather in his eyes. What about Jason and Deidre? How are they handling this? We've talked a little. They have cousins who are feeling the same way. They will need your support later, but I don't think they are ready to talk to you about it right now, I replied. Then I added, Susan and I haven't even told our own parents about this yet. It's all too new and too painful. We are doing everything we can to keep the kids safe. To be honest, they are acting a bit strange. They are not as upset as you might think. Instead, they seem to be dealing with everything pretty well. It feels like the 5 kids are sticking together. They talk to each other more than they talk to Susan or me. I'm not sure what kind of contact they have had with Bonnie. They seem really mad at Bonnie right now, which is understandable. That anger will probably go away with time. I told them they should talk to their mom, but I'm not sure if they have done it yet. I'm just staying out of it. I'm sorry, Robert, I didn't know. I came here today thinking you were being unfair, maybe overreacting to rumors, John said gently. I hope you know I will take care of Jason and Deidre first. I nodded. And then I need to help Bonnie, at least with her basic needs. I want you to know I do not support what she is doing. If you truly have proof, then I will believe you. I hope you keep in touch. You are a good man. He turned and left the office, looking down. I felt more pity for him than for Bonnie. Wow, Susan said when I got home that night. So he found out his daughter isn't as innocent as he thought. I bet he's surprised. We should tell Mom and Dad about this soon. How about tomorrow evening after you finish work? I don't want them to be angry with us for not telling them everything, I said, and I agreed. The meeting was not easy. Dad just wanted to know if I had evidence. I told him I had strong proof. Like John, he cared more about how the kids were feeling than how Susan and I were. I could accept that. In our culture, kids were the priority. Adults were expected to handle the results of their choices. Children were kept safe, but still learned about important things. I hadn't heard anything else from my unknown helper. I was fine with that. I had 4 videos that clearly showed Bonnie and Rich together. I also had audio recordings that showed their relationship was more than a quick romance. It had been carefully planned and had been happening for at least a few years. I didn't need any more evidence. Bonnie didn't just cheat on me in a personal way. She also hurt our family with money problems. I couldn't understand how she saved enough money for a trip to the Cayman Islands, but it made me really angry. To me, she was stealing from us, taking money that should have belonged to the family. Jake began looking into it, using their social security numbers to find where the money was hidden. He promised us that even if the money was missing, we could still get the records for the transactions that took place. On Wednesday morning, we finally got some answers. We came together to list all our shared assets. A court-selected financial expert was there to go through all the documents. I shared an estimate of my yearly income. I also found a pay stub for Bonnie, and I gave it to Jake. Bonnie earned $5,000 each month. My paycheck changed based on how much extra work I put in. By the end of the year, our incomes were only a couple $1,000s apart. Jake told me that this difference would have likely removed any alimony payments, even without the prenup or my proof of cheating. On Monday, the auditor asked for the income tax forms from the last 2 years as well. I felt a sense of joy when I discovered the sealed envelopes tucked away in the bottom drawer of our desk. Susan needed to reach out to the accountant to get copies of her documents and pay to send them to Jake. She was stressed because she didn't know where Rich had hidden their copies. It bothered her that they were not organized with the other family papers like the tax returns from previous years. She knew he earned around $80,000 while she made $50,000. So she felt relieved when Jake told her she would probably get a good monthly support payment. In our state, they call alimony maintenance. Boudreaux walked into the meeting room with Rich and Bonnie close behind. Bonnie gave me a fierce look. I was taken aback by her anger. I thought she would feel some regret. After all, she was the one who cheated and broke apart our marriage. I recognized that tight jaw of hers. She seemed like she wanted to yell at me, but held it in. I guessed Boudreaux had told her to stay calm. Rich looked unhappy. trying hard to keep his face from showing it. The court clerk said his name and introduced his helper, who was writing everything down and also recording us. I thought that everything we said would be put into writing. Let's start. Your lawyers have papers for each of you to sign. These papers say that what you say here today is true as far as you know. Anything you say can be used as proof. We are here to list all your belongings and income. The judge will look over this list and decide how to divide the property. We will not talk about prenuptial agreements, since that is a matter in this case. For the value of vehicles, we will use a standard blue book value based on the year, model, and make of the cars. I understand that you have children who can drive. Even though the car they drive is in both names, for this discussion, we can think of the car as belonging to whoever drives it, as long as both people agree. This way, it will not be counted as shared property. We'll talk about the money shortly. Let's begin with you, Mr. and Mrs. Fontenot. Making a list of the cars, guns, boat, and home furniture only took a few minutes. Even Bonnie's jewelry was easy to handle. I got it checked for its value, and it turned out to be worth more than my pickup truck and guns together. Boudreaux said the solar system should be seen as its own thing. He gave me a paper that showed its value and how it could lose value over time. Jake looked at it and made some notes. Then he nodded. The 401k accounts were included in the report. I asked why, because I thought we should leave those out. No, they are counted since you have been married for over 10 years. In your case, both accounts are almost equal in value, so it shouldn't be a big issue, Jake replied. Then we began to look at the money. I shared the checking and savings account statements from when I took 80% of the funds. Next, he went through the same information for Susan and Rich. This is all pretty simple, Mr. Jacobs, the auditor, said. What worries me is what you've said about the money you've made. There is a big difference between what Mrs. Fontenot is said to earn and the income reported on your tax forms for the last 2 years. Rich straightened up and took a deep breath. I estimated an income of $60,000 for each of you. I nodded and explained that I used a pay stub and multiplied her salary by 12. Yes, but for the past 2 years, Mrs. Fontenot's income was much more than that. She said she made $140,000 every year. My shocked face must have been funny because I couldn't help but shout, "What?" Mr. Jacobs' assistant frowned at me. "Didn't you check your tax returns when you filed?" he asked. I shook my head and told him that Bonnie and Rich wanted a new accountant to do our taxes for the last few years. They wanted to help out one of their clients. It was filed online, I added. I just saw the small refund we were getting back and didn't think about it anymore, I replied. Bonnie's face turned bright red. Her salary is what you thought was her total income, but she also got bonuses of $80,000 each year. I think her take-home pay would be around $60,000 a year, Mr. Jacobs explained. I glanced between Boudreaux, Bonnie, and Rich. Boudreaux looked confused, but the other two seemed like they wished they could leave the room quietly. Now, in Mr. Jenkins's situation, he received $110,000 in bonuses every year. Mrs. Jenkins didn't have their papers, but I looked at the official copies your accountant sent. Susan asked how much more that added up to. After expenses, it's about $80,000 each year, which makes a total of around $160,000. So where is the money, Bonnie? I asked, with anger in my voice. I suppose that's why you both went to the Cayman Islands last Friday. You were trying to keep the money a secret. What do you mean? She started to ask, but then she got very upset. How did you find out? Are you spying on me? She shouted, but then she calmed down. I didn't need to spy on you, I said. You showed me everything yourself. I said this for the two lawyers and the court reporter to hear. She and Susan made sure all the kids had phone locator apps when they got their phones. We used this like a digital leash to see where they were at any moment. It worked the other way, too. I got Jason and Deidre to go talk to you last Friday. When you didn't answer, they checked the app. You were hard to find for most of the day. They kept looking. The other kids began searching for Rich. They were quite surprised to see you both come back just off the coast in the afternoon. By checking the flight arrivals in New Orleans, we figured out you had been to the Caymans. Bonnie and Rich looked shocked. On Monday, they went to your office to see you but found out you were not there. They learned you were in Baton Rouge, so I guess you were moving all the money to the accounts you opened there. Jake stepped in to continue the story. Boudreaux, you know we can get proof about those account balances. It's against the law for a lawyer to tell their clients to hide money in another country to keep it away from shared property. It's strange that your clients flew there just hours after asking you for help. You need to tell your clients that hiding money like this is illegal. With these numbers, it's a serious crime. Bonnie started to cry. Even Rich started to look worried. I almost chuckled at Boudreaux's face. It turned from white to bright red, like a tomato. I thought he might have a heart attack. "I didn't do anything," he shouted, looking at the recorder and Mr. Jacob's helper, who was busy typing. Susan turned to Jake. "Can we make them return the money?" He nodded and said that we would get our full share in the end, even if we had to take some of Rich's and Bonnie's pay. "Once you and Robert show that they were unfaithful in court, you'll get 80% of those accounts. They will have to pay that whole amount." "But there is no money," Bonnie shouted. "It disappeared when we tried to move it." Rich tried to quiet her, but she pushed him away and kept going. "You know this! You took it!" she yelled at me, her voice high and angry. I looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "I didn't even know about the money until just recently. I thought there was money from what you did, but I didn't know how much. What are you going to say next? Did you spend it all or throw it away on gambling?" "I'm not buying either of those stories," I said. She shook her head forcefully. "She told me that they tried to send the money through a bank while they were in Grand Cayman, but the transfer didn't go through, so they went to Baton Rouge on Monday to find out what happened. They both said that all the money had been sent through the bank a week ago. They wanted someone to look into it because their online statement only showed the transfer, but not where the money went or which account it was in. Please give me the bank details for the account in Baton Rouge and I will check on it," Mr. Jacobs said. "I can find out what happened quicker than you can do it yourself." "It will be noted in the court records." Rich and Bonnie both looked upset as they walked out of the room. "I wonder what happened to the money," Susan said. "One moment we had a lot in an account and now it's all gone." I shrugged because I was thinking the same thing. One more mystery, I thought. Somehow Jake and Boudreaux managed to speed up our case. I guessed that Bonnie and Rich had pleaded with Boudreaux to help us see the judge as soon as possible. They stayed at the Holiday Inn for a whole week before deciding to move into the apartment on Victoria Street. I found it funny to think about their talks about showing off their new place. I suspected they were a little short on money. I knew the few $1,000s they had wouldn't last long, especially if Boudreaux wanted a big payment for his help. I almost hoped for an audio message to be sent, but I hadn't gotten any in a while. All 5 kids wanted to be at the hearing. I decided to let them come. I felt that since they were part of the divorce, they should be able to attend. Jake told us what to expect. Judge Guidry preferred to run his court in a relaxed way. He would sit at a table close to us instead of behind his usual high desk. Jake, Susan, and I would sit at a table on the left, while Boudreaux would sit with us. Rich and Bonnie sat in front of us, making a triangle shape. The kids were in the gallery, which looked like the top of a diamond. When Jake stood up, we followed his lead as the judge walked in. He smiled and told us to sit down. "I prefer to handle family matters in a relaxed way," he said. "You should sit and speak when I ask you. If you want to say something, just raise your hand like in class. These meetings can be very emotional, but I hope everyone will be polite and respectful." "Make me angry and you'll be out of here. Got it?" I expected at least one of the kids to laugh at that, but they all stayed quiet. "I've looked at both cases. Usually we would treat these as different problems, but it seems the evidence is the same and the people involved are also the same. A brother-in-law and a sister-in-law are accused of being unfaithful. In Louisiana, being unfaithful alone doesn't change a divorce. I understand that prenuptial agreements can really change how shared property is divided if someone is unfaithful. So, at some point, I will need to see clear proof of that unfaithfulness. First, there were some questions about the cash assets. There were claims that some money might have been hidden. I got the results of the investigation on this matter. It looks like Mrs. Fontenot and Mr. Jenkins both had bank accounts in Baton Rouge. One account had a balance of $120,000 and the other had $160,000. My heart raced. This was proof that she had hidden a lot of money. Now the total money from those accounts was moved out the Monday before this divorce case started. The bank records show that the right passwords were used and the confirmation questions were answered correctly. This shows that Mrs. Fontenot and Mr. Jenkins either moved the money themselves or told someone else how to do it. However, there was no proof that they did anything wrong with the transfers, even with what they said. More checking found out who received the money and the names on those accounts. That part really confuses me. All the money, a total of $280,000, was spread out equally among 5 accounts. The accounts belonged to their kids, Jason and Deidre Fontenot, and Robert, Dave, and Cynthia Jenkins. These transfers are completely legal under the law for gifts to minors. The accounts were set up a few years ago. I think they were meant to help with college costs or to give support if a parent passed away. I was shocked. Why had Bonnie made such a big deal if she had secretly given money to the children? I glanced at the judge. He had a small smile on his face. Rich and Bonnie both looked shocked. Judge Guidry went on. From what I can tell after looking through all the papers, it seems like 2 parents are starting to feel responsible, maybe even a bit guilty. They are giving the money they had kept secret from their spouses to their kids. These types of gifts cannot be taken back unless someone can show that they are part of a trick. Does anyone here have any proof of a trick? I felt really happy. I really wanted to get my 80%, but I was happy that Bonnie and Rich got nothing. It felt great that the money went to the kids instead. I saw Rich and Bonnie looking angrily at Susan and me. They thought we had figured out a way to take their money, but I knew that neither Susan nor I had done anything wrong. As Judge Guidry looked at each of us one by one, we all shook our heads and said, "No, Your Honor." I guess they were worried about getting in trouble for hiding the money and trying to move it abroad. Aside from their angry looks, neither seemed ready to challenge what Judge Guidry was saying. "All right, the next thing we need to talk about is who gets to take care of the young children," the judge said. At this moment, my daughter Deidre raised her hand. He called out to her, "Yes? Your Honor, I found some info online about which parent kids can live with. It said kids who are 15 and older can choose," she explained. "Yes, in some places children can decide as long as there is no sign of abuse. But in this state, that rule does not apply." "I do talk to the kids alone and think about what they say," Judge Guidry said. Deidre, still on her feet, replied, "I don't need to talk to you alone. My mom was not loyal to my dad. It hurt our whole family. I want to stay with my dad." She tapped Jason on the shoulder. He quickly got up and said he wanted to live with her too. Robert, Dave, and Cindy stood up together and said they all wanted to stay with their mom for the same reason. My heart filled with joy. I gently held Susan's hand under the table. "I will think about what you want," Judge Guidry said with a small smile. "But so far we have not proven that any cheating, as you call it, happened." Deidre raised her hand again. The judge called on her once more. "I also learned that a 16-year-old can ask the court to be independent. This means they can live by themselves, and a 17-year-old can leave home without that request." Deidre stayed on her feet while the judge spoke to her. "Yes, for a 17-year-old, that's an old rule, but it still exists. It was created because young men wanted to join the army without needing their parents' permission. Now, for a 16-year-old asking to be independent, one of the requirements is that they must be able to take care of themselves." "All right." Deidre nodded and replied, "I have saved money for college. I just got an extra $56,000 added to it. That doesn't even count what my parents and grandparents might have added before." At this moment, Cindy got up from her chair. "Me too," she said. "Together, we have a good amount of money to live on our own for a long time." Her brother Dave stood up and gave a big smile. "Me too. We could live together and rent a nice place." Jason and Rob stood up and said that if they pooled their money, all 5 of them could do really well on their own. I glanced at the judge to see what he thought. He was trying hard not to laugh. I could tell that if he weren't in court, he would be chuckling loudly. "Let me guess. If I don't agree with what you want, you all will ask the court to let you be on your own, or in the case of the older boys, just move out by yourselves." 5 heads nodded in agreement. "Please have a seat," he said firmly. "I will think about what you've mentioned. We need to talk about the claim of cheating in this situation. Usually this isn't a big deal in a divorce, but in this case, both people have a strong prenuptial agreement. This will change how we divide shared property. So I need you to show me any evidence you have that cheating took place." Jake got to his feet. Your Honor, I received these pictures showing Richard Jenkins and Bonnie Fontenot together in a private moment. Boudreau stood up and said, I object, Your Honor. Anyone with a good photo editing program can create a fake picture. I have a picture of me shaking hands with the president and another of us playing golf. My son made those as a joke. I want to mention that the lawyer did not say where his claimed evidence came from. Judge Guidry glanced at Jake, then at Susan and me. Jake gave me a nod to speak. Your Honor, I'm not sure where our evidence comes from. I received a set of videos and audio files from someone who didn't show their name. I took those pictures as screenshots from one of the videos I got. I didn't want to show a video unless it was necessary, but I have a DVD and a flash drive that have a full video of my wife and brother-in-law together in a private moment. I glanced at Rich and Bonnie. They looked shocked, their eyes wide and their faces pale. They shook their heads as if they couldn't believe what I was saying. However, Your Honor, if you decide to play the video in the courtroom, I would request that we ask the kids to leave the room. They don't need to see this. That's okay, Daddy, Deidre said from the side. It's just something we all know about, and we've seen worse videos before. Cindy chimed in. Yeah, like that one where Daddy had Aunt Bonnie in a funny position on the couch, and she was making silly sounds. Hoo, hoo, hoo! The 5 kids burst into laughter. I was left sitting there, surprised for a moment. Suddenly, everything made sense. I took what I knew and connected the dots. The truth was both comforting and troubling. I turned to the back of the courtroom where my father sat quietly watching. He gave me a nod. Judge Guidry glanced at Bonnie and Rich to see how they were feeling. Their faces were bright red, and they looked very shaken. Okay, should I play the file that Mr. Fontenot has just given us? Do all sides agree that cheating really happened? I could tell Boudreau would have wanted to see the video. The way he glanced around and the way he kept licking his lips showed he was quite interested. But when Bonnie and Rich hurriedly asked the judge not to show the video I had, he changed his mind. Could I have a moment or two with my clients, please? He asked. He turned to them and saw them shaking their heads strongly. Okay, I guess we have to accept what the other side is saying, he said slowly. In that case, I am ready to give my decision, Judge Guidry said. To make this clear for everyone, my choice affects both sides. Since everyone agrees that there was cheating, the prenuptial agreement will be followed. Just as Susan and I had hoped, we were given 80% of the shared property. Judge Guidry suggested that we talk with our lawyers about how to divide everything up. He mentioned that we really didn't want the court to step in for the little details. When it comes to who takes care of the kids, he said, I can see that the only fair choice will be to give Robert Fontenot full custody of Jason and Deidre Fontenot. At the same time, I will give Susan Jenkins custody of Cynthia, Robert, and David Jenkins. Both people involved have asked for it in their agreement, so the parents who do not have the kids living with them will have full visiting rights. Legally, this divorce will be completed in 6 months. The extra money they received made their incomes much higher. Because of this, Bonnie and Rich were told to pay support to their former partners. Bonnie has to pay me $1,000 each month, and Rich has to pay Susan $2,000 every month for the next 3 years. Each child who needed help would get $500 every month until they turned 18. I thought both Bonnie and Rich faced serious problems, but Jake said they were only receiving small payments. He believed they were getting away with a lot and suggested we could challenge this. I just shook my head. I could see Susan was unsure about my thoughts, but she decided to trust me. When the judge announced the hearing was over, we were allowed to leave. Jake said he would set up our meeting to talk about how to share the property. I told the kids to head straight home, change their clothes, and wait for me. I wanted us all to have a family meeting. Susan and I walked to the back of the courtroom where Dad was waiting for us. When did you start to understand, Dad? I asked. Susan looked at me, confused. I realized it when Deidre and Cindy made those comments about the videos, he replied. Did you figure it out? I asked the puzzled Susan. Pissed Off 999 is a name the kids made up. She looked shocked. No, Dad replied. I found out what was happening a few days ago when I checked an old credit card bill. About 2 months ago, Jason and Rob came to me. They wanted to use the card. They said they were planning something nice for your anniversaries and needed a card to buy things online. They told me they had put their money together and promised to pay me back. They said it needed to be a secret, but the amount would be about $500. When I got my bank statement, I saw that the purchase was from an electronics store. I didn't think much of it then, but a few days ago I called the store to ask what they had bought. The store was very closed off and didn't want to share the information at first. I had to remind them that the card was in my name and that the billing and delivery addresses were different. The kids bought bugs for cell phones. "Did you really spend $500? I asked. It turned out those tiny spy gadgets cost a lot. Dad was confused about how the kids even got video cameras. He chose to come home with me to learn more. He wanted to hear the whole story. All 5 kids were in the living room. They grew quiet when Susan, Dad, and I entered through the front door. "Let's go to the kitchen and sit at the table." Susan stopped for a moment to grab 3 beers. She handed one to Dad and gave another to me. Jason and Rob reached out their hands, smiling. "You might be old enough to be spies, but you're not old enough to drink," I told them. They just shrugged. They understood I wasn't upset. "Okay, who wants to tell their story first? Let's start at the beginning." Deidre spoke up. "It all began when Cindy and I went to visit Mom at her office, but she wasn't there. Uncle Rich was missing, too. It was around the time when they began the second part of the COVID lockdown. We hoped to get a little money from one of them to go see a movie. The secretary told us they were not there and had left a while back. It was long after lunch, so we decided to find out where they went. You know, we have that tracking feature Mom made us put on our phones. It showed them at an unusual address, so we went to check it out. It turned out to be an apartment building. When we arrived, we noticed Uncle Rich's car, so we decided to wait. A little while later they came out, but they weren't acting like they usually do. They were holding each other and smiling a lot. This made us curious, so we started to keep an eye on where they were going over the next few days. They went back to that same place 3 days in a row and stayed for about an hour and a half each time. Sometimes they went in the late afternoon after work, but before returning home. We shared this with the boys. Rob took charge of the conversation. We looked online and found small devices that can be placed in cell phones. When you install the app, it acts like a never-ending phone call. It works quietly in the background and does not disrupt normal calls. However, it does use up the battery a bit faster than usual. It can pick up sounds around the phone so someone can listen in if they want. We convinced Paw Paw to let us use his credit card to buy them. Sorry for not telling you the truth, Paw Paw. Getting the phones ready was simple. We each took a turn to check on them and hear what they were saying. We saved anything good so we could talk about it later. So that explains the sound recordings. But how did you get the video? And how did you find out which apartment they were using? I asked. We checked their keys. Both had a key that said 201. That wasn't the number of their office. So Jason took Mom's key and made a copy. We visited the apartment a few times to look around. We thought we needed cameras, Deidre said. So we bought some and a little transmitter, Dave added. He was excited about the technology. He didn't seem to realize he was talking about how it might affect 2 marriages and break apart 2 families. At least Susan and I were finding some answers. The cameras only worked when they saw movement, so they didn't use too much battery. We hid the device by taping it under the couch. The device gathered information from the cameras and sent it to our receiver here. We recorded everything. It was pretty straightforward. All right, so you recorded videos of Bonnie and Rich being together. You also made audio files and sent some to me, I said slowly. These were my children and my niece and nephews. I couldn't be harsh with them and ruin our family connection. But there was also the big problem with the money. Dad, when Cindy and I first saw that apartment, I knew our mom wasn't coming back, Deidre said firmly. Well, not really gone, but things would never be the same for our family. They had hidden clothes there, mostly underwear, and I recognized some of Mom's outfits. There was also a makeup set along with towels and washcloths. We understood what was happening. After spending time together and then getting ready, they came home to you and Aunt Sue as if nothing was wrong. Everyone was really upset. They weren't just being unfaithful to you and Aunt Sue. They were being unfaithful to all of us, too. Now about the money situation. The hidden bank accounts were another issue, Cindy said. While we were looking at the apartment, we found some papers regarding a bank account. It had steps on how to access it online. It took a while for us to actually find the accounts. We spent some time in Dad's and Aunt Bonnie's offices exploring. The secretary let us in so we could wait for them a few times. She giggled as she remembered. We went through a lot of files and eventually found one in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk with some important papers. Then we checked the same spot in Aunt Bonnie's office and discovered more documents. Aunt Bonnie has, or I guess still has, a small notebook in her purse. It has passwords and other details in it. It didn't say secret bank account, but the password was strange, much more complicated than password 1, which she used for her phone. After some time, we figured out it was the correct password. It turned out they used the same password for both accounts. Jason took charge of the account. We already knew they were not being honest. When we discovered they had secret bank accounts, we were really angry. We wondered if they were involved in something illegal or taking money that wasn't theirs. Dave was the one who suggested that we put the money in our own accounts. Dave turned red. What I really meant was that we can't let Dad and Aunt Bonnie get rich while the rest of us miss out. We had been learning about how things are divided in a divorce, and we didn't think it was fair that they would keep half of that money. Since Pawpaw set up those accounts for us, I thought it would be a good idea to take all the money. I had a feeling the police might find out, but I thought since we were young and it was our parents' money, we wouldn't get in too much trouble. The others agreed, so we went ahead with it. If we had known about the split of 80-20, we might not have gone through with it, Deidre said, looking sorry. Honestly, this way turned out better. And then you all began sending me videos and recordings? I asked, glancing around the table. I felt a bit relieved to see that there was doubt in their faces instead of just open pride. That was the tough part, Dad, Jason said softly. We were so angry at Mom and Uncle Rich for what they were doing to us. We didn't want to hurt you and Aunt Sue, but we felt like we couldn't do anything, so we sent you that first video. We watched you closely. You kept asking us to come visit Pawpaw and Meemaw. We kept making excuses, and we knew you were getting frustrated. I felt really upset. If you had taken the gun from the safe, we would have told you everything. We knew you would tell Aunt Sue, and that made us worried. We had already moved the money that Mom had kept hidden. I guess we took it without asking. Well, I know we took it without asking. But we all agreed that they had treated us unfairly, so we thought it was okay to take it. I hope you and Aunt Sue are not too upset. I glanced at Susan, and her face looked shocked the whole time. I just hope you kids never get mad at me and Sue, I said with a smile. But if you ever try to pull a fast one on me like you did with your mom and Rich, I might have to give you a real talking to, even if I have to use my walker at the nursing home. They all laughed at my joke. You don't have to worry about that, Daddy, Deidre said. You would never let us down. We Cajuns always stick together. There's one thing I don't get, my dad said. You used my credit card to buy the bugs for the cell phones. They were really pricey. Where did you find the cash and the card for those video cameras? Oh, those. They cost around $500 each because they recorded full video with sound and had motion and sound sensors built in. We got 5 of them, Jason replied. Plus, there's another $500 each for the hidden transmitter that sends the signal to the receiver we hooked up to Deidre's computer. So that adds up to $3,500 plus shipping. We can get some of that money back if we return everything in good shape. We've already taken out all the cameras and the transmitter. We might have lost the cell phone bugs, though. As for the credit card, we used Dad's Visa card. I told them I didn't have a Visa card. Well, you do now. I applied for one and signed your name for you, Jason admitted. At least he looked a little guilty about it. It has a $10,000 limit. We bring the mail inside every day, so it was easy to keep it hidden, Deidre added. Cindy and I created the email account called Pissed Off 999. Rob thought of the name. He said he was really angry about what Mom and Uncle Rich did. The kids all smiled and nodded, happy that Susan, Dad, and I were impressed too. Are the cell phone bugs still working? I asked. Dave nodded and said they would keep working as long as the phone batteries were still good. With those and the phone locator app, we can always know where they are and what they are doing, Dave added. He felt excited when he understood they were safe. Whenever they talk near their phones, we can hear them. It picks up their voices, so we get a lot of car noise and just talk about work things. We took turns looking through the files to find anything useful. I asked to listen to the audio. Because of this, Susan and I knew ahead of time what Bonnie and Rich wanted in the meeting about the property. Bonnie really wanted her jewelry. so she gave me most of her money and all the things in her house. We agreed to some of their requests without too much fuss, but we definitely made them squirm a bit during the process. Susan surprised everyone except me when she suggested that they walk across town and back holding signs that said, "We cheated on our partners." She said Bonnie should wear just a simple outfit and Rich should wear shorts while they did it. Instead, we could challenge the amounts for alimony and child support. I noticed Boudreaux's eyes seemed like they might pop out when I said this. I could tell he was really surprised, probably thinking about Bonnie in a revealing way. We had overheard Boudreaux saying that they were lucky with the support payments and had warned them that Susan and I would probably contest those amounts. Susan finally changed her mind after making both of them get down on their knees to say sorry. Epilogue. I don't really know how it all took place, and I promise I did not play any part in it. 2 months after our meeting, the insurance company where Bonnie and Rich worked discovered that he had rented an apartment for an affair using company money. While everyone in the office received bonuses over the past 2 years, Bonnie's bonuses were strangely much bigger than everyone else's each year. Rich had gotten a lot of bonuses, but no one really knew why. When everything came out, he and Bonnie were let go. There was no celebration. The company wanted to avoid any extra attention. None of the videos ever appeared online. Susan and I joked while having some beers, thinking it would be amusing to make them famous, but the kids didn't want to be embarrassed in front of others. We understood why they felt that way. Bonnie and Rich now live in New Orleans, where they work for a small shipping company. Since they left, they rarely visit the kids and hardly ever call. The last I heard, they were struggling to pay their maintenance and child support. I hope things get better for them. Well, maybe not. One of my favorite writers, Van Demonium, likes to share a joke after his stories. So I decided to add a little twist to the story. Thibodeau was sitting on his porch when he saw his cousin Boudreaux pull up in his truck. To Thibodeau's surprise, 5 penguins hopped out when Boudreaux opened the door. "Boudreaux, what are you doing with those penguins?" he shouted. "They just followed me home," Boudreaux replied with a big grin. "Aren't they adorable? You have to take them to the zoo tomorrow. Got it?" Thibodeau told him firmly. His cousin nodded. 2 days later, Thibodeau left the liquor store with a case of beer. He spotted Boudreaux walking down the street. He had a big umbrella and a bag with 5 penguins following him. "Boudreaux, didn't I ask you to take those penguins to the zoo?" "Yes," Boudreaux replied. "I took them. We had so much fun that now we are going to the beach today." Hey, audience! If you like this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.